Hello, everyone. Andy Jacob here with the DotCom Magazine Entrepreneur Spotlight Series. Buckle up, everybody. We have an amazing entrepreneur on the show today. You know, so many people at the DotCom Magazine show, when they reach out to us, they say, we love it, Jake, when you bring the leaders in the field on the show. So, of course, we go through the Rolodex all the time, looking for the best of the best. And today's show, well, we're leading by example because we've been able to invite Miss Rebecca Corbin, who's the founder and CEO of Corbin Advisors. Now, you've probably heard of Corbin Advisors. Rebecca's an entrepreneur. She's a visionary. She's a strategist and a real leading thought leader. We're going to get into it all. But before we get started, Rebecca, welcome to the DotCom Magazine Entrepreneur Spotlight Series.
Thank you so much. And it's a pleasure to be here.
It's awesome to have you. Of course, you're an author as well, but you know, we've got so many questions for you. You're a leader. I don't want to take all the time up talking about all the awards that you've won and your background and your experience. I mean, I could take the whole 30 minutes going over all of that. But before we get started with the questions, let's pull the lens back to 30,000 feet as we always do and tell us about Corbin Advisors, and then we'll get into it.
Sure. We're a strategic investor relations research and advisory firm. We work with publicly traded companies ranging from 250 million all the way up to 350 billion in market cap, also pre-IPOs. And our focus is really on helping executives and boards understand perception and voice of shareholder insights to be able to then craft very sophisticated and targeted narratives to their investor base, resulting in sustained value creation and the penultimate goal, compounding status.
Yeah, I love it so much. Of course, you've been doing this for over 20 years. So, you know, people are watching the show. They're probably saying, well, did she start when she was in second grade? I mean, this is awesome. So listen, let's get down to it. What types of companies reach out to you and say, hey, you know, we've heard what's going on, Rebecca, you've come referred, your team is amazing. I mean, you've got this world-class team. Your board of advisors, I mean, are so impressive.
Thank you.
What types of companies reach out to you and say, hey, we need this help. We need this Corbin advantage, if you will.
Sure. Well, our clients tend to be outperformers, or they tend to be companies that want to outperform. And we've really built our practice on ground truth and trust with our organizations. Obviously, we deal with very sophisticated material, non-public information. And also our proprietary research helps companies really unlock tremendous value. And so our clients are for sure companies that are grounded in who they are. They want the ground truth. They want to have the real deal, and they want to be best in class. And they want to outperform not only for their true institutional shareholders, but also their employees, their customers, et cetera. So, you know, these are companies that generally are aspirational best in class or best in class.
It's so awesome. And of course, you mentioned research. I mean, you are like the queen of research. Everybody knows that you love research. You provide key metrics, you know, across, you know, many different sort of things of which the company needs to look at. When you do the research, I mean, what's going on through your team's mind about the types of research you want to do and how it's going to impact your clients?
Well, as you mentioned, I spent the last 20 years conducting voice of investor research. And I did start a company, you know, not in second grade, but in my early 20s for Thompson Financial, that then I hung my own shingle many years later. But, you know, we have developed a proven methodology. When you think about Wall Street and you think about global, you know, financial institutions, it is a very dynamic, complex, intense, tons of data, tons of noise with regard to what truly makes a stock move up or down. And we focus on the high impact, needle moving institutional investors who are active investors and also passive investors, because you can influence index investing through different strategies. And so our research is really trying to cut through the noise, boil the ocean, as I like to say, and really get at the heart of the factors that impact valuation. And when we look at our research, and I've spent my entire life's work conducting this research to get to the Corbin Critical Five. And the Corbin Critical Five looks at when all of these investors are making investment decisions. They're running their own screens because they have to have investment opportunities that have PE of X and dividend of Y or free cash flow yield of Z. And when they screen these companies, they're typically looking at about 55 companies in which to make one or two investments. So how do they actually get to that investment opportunity? Well, that's really where the Corbin Critical 5 comes in. 16,000 plus interviews with investors and analysts globally has led us to 5 factors that influence investment. And I believe that this is not just true for institutional investors, but quite frankly, any investor and also an employee looking to invest their time with companies. Number 1 is leadership. Is the management team credible? Are they transparent? Are they knowledgeable? Number 2 is strategic vision. Is there a clear strategic plan that they have? Number 3 is an execution track record. Have they had a history of delivering on what they said that they were going to do? The say-do ratio, as we call it. Number 4 is competitive advantage. What are their sustainable competitive advantages? And number 5 is capital allocation. How are they going to invest their capital that they generate to really drive even greater value?
Yeah, it's so powerful. And of course, you know, you're a highly sought after and very prolific public speaker. I mean, you've spoken at the World Economic Forum in Davos. You're a reoccurring guest on, you know, Squawk on the Street on CNBC and so many others. When we think about it and we think about big problems, because, you know, we have so many leading entrepreneurs on the show, and we like to talk about sort of the big problem, if there is one. When companies reach out to you, Fortune 100 companies, Fortune 1000 companies, world-class, you know, brands, is there one major problem that they're saying, hey, Rebecca, we need some help because, you know, this is the thing that's sort of the big headlight that's shining in our eyes right now?
Well, it all actually draws back to valuation. So clients that reach out to us, again, are either in the best-in-class camp and they really appreciate independent third-party perspective, whether that's voice of customer or, as we've trademarked, voice of investor research. So we specialize in that constituency that are your investors, or companies that are undervalued. And they could be undervalued for a whole host of reasons. And when they work with us in our 4 A's spectrum, assess, architect, activate, and accelerate spectrum, we're focused on first the assess. We could do a whole host of different things with our time and money, but we should really target that based on research. And we are a data-driven, research-based firm that draws deep insights from the primary research that we're doing. And so it's really around, how do we get valued in the eyes of investors for the value that is intrinsic to our company?
Yeah, that's so fascinating. Of course, we have younger entrepreneurs watching the show, everybody from startup, you know, entrepreneurs to CEOs of public companies. When you're doing this data research, Rebecca, you and your team have become worldwide, you know, renowned for. Do you ever provide the data and then, you know, the people at the companies or the C-level, you know, executives, it's exactly opposite of maybe of what they thought it was going to be, and they have like a mind-blowing sort of moment when they say, wow, we never thought about that?
Well, if I had $1 for every time our client said, there's nothing surprising here, I could probably retire. So even if they thought that, I'm not sure that they would readily admit that. However, the research is geared toward creating and being a catalyst for change. And so this is not something that they've heard from it from their investor relations officer. They may have heard about it from their board or their investors or their investment bankers. What we bring to the table is quantitative evidence that says, we heard this, but now we understand that 78% of investors want us to do a buyback. That is much more powerful than anecdotal information. And really, our ability to quantify and be that last research piece where they feel very confident that if they make the decision based on our research, it will result in a positive outcome, is what we give to our clients.
It's so powerful, Rebecca. You mentioned catalysts for change. And that's something very interesting because so many public companies now are sort of thinking more in terms of what they need to do for society, what they need to do, you know, for the world, how they can impacted in a powerful way like you've done, in your own life. So what's the big change? What's the sea change that's happening in these big companies where they're all saying to themselves, we need to make an impact. We want to make the world a better place, as well as, of course, doing what's right for our shareholders.
Sure. Well, when we think about companies, whether you're public or private, you have different constituencies. You have your employees, you have your customers, you have your investors. At private companies, you have investors too, typically. And the big sea change that we are seeing, and quite frankly, this is a decades in the making, is really what we call in the financial world ESG, environmental, social, and governance framework. And this is really around sustainability, and public companies have truly embraced this. Because investors are forcing them to embrace this, and also their employees are saying, we want to work with a company that is a good steward of our community, of our planet, et cetera. And so this is really shaping. We have also a very different generational workforce than maybe when you and I were in our 20s starting our career. And this is a workforce that really wants to have impact. And we're also at this point, as we've seen with inflation and supply chain and all of the other areas that are impacting us, the race for talent, that companies that embrace a sustainability mindset where they are going to have positive impact within their culture, diversity and inclusion, and embracement of different thoughts and different people, and also in the products that they're producing with regard to making our world more sustainable, are going to attract the strongest talent. And so I'm really excited because I've been a environmentalist my entire life. In third grade, I was under a woodsy owl, give a hoot, don't pollute. And, really I've taken that with me in my entire life. And I am extremely thrilled to see what's happening today. And also be a part of that because, we launched 2 businesses last year. We launched an ESG practice, which focuses on helping publicly traded companies understand what they actually are doing already in ESG and catapulting, accelerating that strategy. And our firm has been responsible for having companies hire chief of sustainability officers, getting much more committed to diversity and inclusion. So that feels really good for our employee base. And we also launched a nonprofit practice where we help nonprofit organizations more effectively fulfill their missions through the work that we do in marketing and finance and strategy, taking this real strong muscle that supports publicly traded companies, which I would argue are some of the most scrutinized and strongest, and taking that muscle to nonprofits that may not be able to invest the funds into talent at that level.
Yeah, it's so powerful. What you're doing now with the nonprofits is the evolution of Corbin Advisors. And we'll get into that in just a moment. But, one thing that really resonates is this ESG that you mentioned. Now, when we think about the big companies, the publicly traded companies, their workforce is different, like you mentioned, than the way it was 20, 30, 40 years ago. So I would imagine that it's so impactful to bring on, your group to sort of help the company along the way with the ESG planning, the ESG strategy, because what happens with that, it sounds like to me, is that when they start clicking on all cylinders with this ESG commitment, it makes the employees stick to the company better. It makes them more loyal to the brand, more loyal to the organization. Is that the way it works?
Absolutely. When you're focused on having a positive environmental impact, so not just, the footprint of reduction of energy and all of those types of things, but also the handprint, which is, we're creating more sustainable product or solutions, et cetera. It's highly inspirational to your employee base. Same thing with the social component, your employee resource groups and making sure that you have diversity of thought and that's running down the entire organization. And I would say that this is a multi-year, we're going to be in this shift for decades, and it's a terrific shift. It's already started at the top. Boards, executive leadership teams get it in general. They embrace it. They are focused on diversifying their own leadership team. But the challenge is going to be driving that down into the entire organization at the management level, throughout the organization. And that's really where you can have significant impact, because we know that in order to be promoted, et cetera, first of all, you have to get hired, and then you have to have a sponsor to really move you through that. And that's really where I think, organizations can focus through the fatty middle, as I like to call it. But no doubt with regard to if you have a purpose as a company and you are having significant impact in the community and for planet Earth, again, that is the generation that, we have right now. And it's the right thing to do. So it's good for business and it's good for our world.
Yeah, I love it. And of course, I want to get into what you're doing with nonprofits, with your commitment, which is absolutely remarkable. And wait till people hear about this. But before we do, you've transitioned your company into helping nonprofits as well. And it's so needed. So at a high level, let's talk about what you can do for nonprofits because it's remarkable.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Part of our culture is around giving back. And so, you have a lot of entrepreneurial folks on this call. I've spent a lot of time building our cultural brand, our employee brand. And, we attract and hire and retain folks who are very philanthropically driven with their time or their resources. And so this has been a passion of mine for many, many years. I sit on several boards of nonprofit organizations. I have seen the challenges that they face. And the work that we do for publicly traded companies is 100% transferable to working with organizations, quite frankly, any organization, because we focus on strategy, we focus on communication, it's research driven, it's data driven insights. And so we've essentially taken all of these great skill sets and reduced our fees significantly to be able to support nonprofits with regard to developing strategy, developing marketing, helping them run their capital campaigns. And we give back 20% of our operating profits in the form of grants to nonprofits.
It's so powerful. And, nonprofits and for-profits, there's so many similarities. And you're still building a business as a nonprofit. And, we talk to so many CEOs and founders and directors of nonprofits, and they always say the same thing to me. They say, Jake, or they say, Andy, we're running a business. We just happen to be a nonprofit. So I would imagine all the strategy and all the data that you can bring, all this data-driven information to the nonprofits just resonates for them in such a powerful way. And of course, you're involved in so many nonprofits. You and your husband are on, supporting so many different organizations, from the orchestra to everything else that you're involved with, to the colleges that you're involved with, of course, and the universities. Let's talk about entrepreneurism just a little bit, okay? Because we have younger entrepreneurs watching the show. They're going to be watching you, they're going to be saying to themselves, wow, this is fascinating. I hope to be a, NASDAQ traded company or a New York Stock Exchange traded company or a public company at some point in time in the future. But I've got a startup right now and I'm hitting some potholes in the road, or maybe I'm freezing in the frame, or maybe I'm hitting a wall that I can't get through. Maybe you can give Rebecca some sort of ideas or some thoughts to the younger entrepreneurs watching the show that are maybe having a tough time getting through sort of those initial steps with those potholes in the road.
Sure. Well, first of all, you have to have passion. And I think any entrepreneur has that passion for what they've identified they want their life's work to be. But as an entrepreneur, grit, hard work, passion, that gets you so far. And it can be very inspirational to your employee base. And, over my years of doing this, first, starting a company incubating a company within another company, which I had the benefit of resources and, doing everything on my own, but with that support, to then going out on my own and starting the same practice, but built bigger, driving that. I've learned a couple of lessons. One is that talent is worth it. And, you have to really be able to pitch your story and your energy and your passion and find people who say, you know what, I'm willing to make an investment with my time. I know that you can't afford my skill set at this level, but if I work with you and we build it together, we're going to accomplish great things, and there will be a financial benefit in that sense. And so it's really thinking about the talent and getting your talent on board. The second thing is people. You have to engage, inspire, understand, listen to, and lead people. And, you really have to build your culture based on your own management style and your own vision. You want to have folks that align with that. And, because I always look at it as a marriage of, nobody likes a breakup. But if you're really thoughtful around going into that relationship, employee, employer, hopefully you have stronger outcomes with regard to lower turnover, because nobody likes that and it's expensive. And the third thing is really, as you build, I've learned, I have a lot of great capabilities and skills, and then I know what I'm not good at. And that's really bringing in talent that you can trust, that really fills that gap with regard to expertise, human resources, finances, legal, all of those types of things. And, you have to constantly innovate and you have to disrupt yourself. And so we have a very strong process-oriented culture. We are very data-driven, as I've mentioned. We're very operationally focused as well. And so we don't want to build on top of a foundation that's not strong enough to hold the growth that we want to achieve. And so we've really taken a methodology of slow and steady wins the race. I call it acclimating and elevating. So if you're climbing Mount Everest, which I always tell our team we are, and we're at base camp 2, going to base camp 3, you have to acclimate to that hyper growth feel before you really expand. And quite frankly, you have to go backward and then go up. And so, it's all about making sure that you're not moving too quickly with an unsolid foundation, because you won't be able to scale it in that situation.
It's so powerful. And for the people watching the show, especially the younger entrepreneurs, rewind what Rebecca just said. You just got yourself an MBA right there within a 2 or 3 minute time frame. I mean, that's awesome. I love the fact that you said disrupt yourself. I mean, that resonates for me so much, and I love it. Now, I know you've only cut out a certain amount of time, and I really appreciate it. This has been awesome, Rebecca. I'm going to have you back on the show just to talk about your entrepreneurial journey, because it just is so fascinating. But before we go, how important for the younger entrepreneurs is it to find some mentors? How important is it to surround themselves with people that can give them some insight, give them some strategy, help them along the way in their entrepreneurial journey?
It's really critical. I feel very fortunate to have the many entrepreneurial mentors that I have, and also mentors that are executives at major corporations that, maybe their experience is different than mine, but my aspiration is to be, where they are. And so, in terms of mentorship, you really want to find folks who have gone through what you've gone through. So there has to be a match there, because I will tell you that I've had mentors who ran, multi-billion-dollar organizations, and their advice to me wasn't really on point with what I needed it to be based on where I was in my own evolution. So very appreciative and respectful, but it taught me a lesson that said, you really need to think about your mentors having capabilities and skills that are going to help you along the way in wherever you are on your journey. And I work with a coach. I love my coach. It's somebody that I could speak with about the issues that I'm facing, different matters, get a different perspective. And, it's always great. If you play any type of sport, you want to have a coach that's training you and teaching you and supporting you and inspiring you as well. And so that's how I really look at it.
It's so powerful, Rebecca. You're a visionary, a strategist, a thought leader, of course, an author. You're data-driven, and a mother. All right. I love it. I love it.
Don't forget about that. It's really hard to be an entrepreneur of a hyper-growth company while having 4 daughters and being a wife, which I love everything about my life and giving in all of those capacities. But, it is part of the mix.
I love it so much. I was going to close the interview down because I know you've only sliced out a little bit of time for me, but I'm going to indulge myself with one more question. So I'm going to take you over just a little bit. You mentioned 4 daughters. Okay.
Yes.
They're growing up. What type of advice do you give them, when they're starting to think about entrepreneurship or careers? I mean, what sort of focus do you give with the Corbin expertise for your own daughters as they're growing up and, becoming what they're going to become, which is obviously people that are going to contribute to society in a wonderful way?
Absolutely. Well, I'm blessed with 4 daughters that range from 25 to 3. And my husband happens to be an executive as well. So you can imagine these kids and what they are listening to over dinner around business and the economy and culture and climate and all of these different things. But, The advice that I give my children is really, you got to have your passion. That is something that my father told me very early on. He said, find your passion and everything else will follow, meaning money and happiness and all of that. And I really try to instill that in my children, and also to give back. I'm a big giver, and not because I want to get that back, but because it does make me feel good. So maybe it is true that there's no such thing as an altruistic act because I'm benefiting by having the endorphins of happiness. But I really instill that stewardship in my children, that I feel so blessed because I did not come from financial means. And I feel very blessed to have what I have. And, I can't take it with you, as my grandmother always used to say. So to have impact in this world by doing good.
Rebecca, it's absolutely awesome. So entrepreneur, visionary, strategist, thought leader, author, and mom, of course, super mom. This has been a great interview. I'm going to have you back on the show again. I really appreciate what you're doing, especially with the ESG that you're doing. And of course, now moving into the nonprofit world, helping those nonprofits with everything that they do as well. And your team is really purpose built. I mean, you just deliver great value to your clients. And with your experience, it's no wonder why you're a leader in the space. Rebecca, I want to thank you so much for coming on the .com Magazine Entrepreneur Spotlight Series today. This has been remarkable.
Thank you, Andy. I really appreciate it. Thank you for your time.